Let's continue on with our recipe application. We're going to take a look at, once again, using the F12 developer tools within Microsoft Edge. And we're going to go through the process of previewing some of the changes before we finalize them in our CSS file. So in this instance, a couple of the things that we're going to take a look at are applying some borders and maybe dealing with some padding and some margins for the document that we have. So our favorite recipes are displayed here on the screen. And one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to look at applying a border to our images. And so from the preview perspective, one of the things that we can do is right-click the image and choose Inspect Element. And with our F12 developer tools open down here, you'll see that we automatically highlight that image. And then we have an inline style available, and then we have a full-on style for all images in the document. So if we want to manipulate this and take a look at maybe what a style might look like with applying a border to this particular image before we apply it to all, we can use the inline style option. So let's take a look at how to do that. Let's go ahead and add a border element in here. And then we're going to set it at 5 pixel solid black just so that we can actually see the border itself. When we close out that style by applying the semicolon to it, you can see that we now have a black border applied to our image. If we scroll down the page and take a look, that none of the other images have that style applied to it. So again, all that I'm really demonstrating here is the ability to manipulate one element on the page, maybe to preview it before you apply the changes to all of the others. So let's go ahead and add some padding to this image. Let's click inside our next element for our styling, and let's go ahead and choose the padding option. And then we're going to apply the padding all the way around, so we won't use the padding left, padding right, what have you. And in this case, we'll set the padding up as maybe 10 pixels and just see what that looks like. And we can say, all right, this gives us our padding, it gives us a border around the image, so we're kind of happy with that. Now we can apply that, if we want to all the images in the document by clicking inside the IMG class or the IMG tag inside this particular style. Let's go ahead and add that border that we had here. So we'll go with a border, we'll set it at 5 pixel solid black. And then we also want to add the padding, so we'll add that padding element in here and we'll set the padding at 10 pixel. Now you'll notice that when I put these into this element and I put the semicolons to close this out, what I end up noticing is that I have these strike-throughs, or they appear to be crossed out. The interesting aspect though is if you scroll through the document, they have been applied to each one of the images. But essentially what's taking place is that, again, think of this cascading aspect of cascading style sheets. It cascades down through, and then the most relevant or the closest to the element style gets applied. Because we have the border and padding as an inline style, it is, in a sense, overriding these styles even though they're identical. So we can solve that problem by simply clearing the checkboxes from these two styles. The strike-throughs go away here, get replaced up here, and our images still have the borders and the padding that are available. So that's an example of looking at dealing with the image elements, and we've set some padding, we've set some borders around the image elements. A couple of the other things that we want to manipulate in here and see how they look is some of the padding that we have or the margins that we have around the different elements that are in here. If we take a look at the whole page itself, we can come up and select the HTML element, and this applies to the entire document. We can set inline styles here. We can focus on setting them on the body style itself, and in which case we can apply margins in here as well. So if you do come into the HTML element and we decide to apply a margin, and then we can actually want to narrow that margin, we can set it for 0 pixel. And you'll notice that once we do that, up here in our document, we actually have no space on the sides. But the other interesting aspect is that even though we've gotten rid of that margin, it appears to only have been maybe a right or left margin, we still see a margin at the top. This is because this element is an H1. So again, you can right-click and inspect that element. It'll go directly to it in the DOM. And then we can decide that we want to apply a margin for this one as well. So if we set a margin on this one and set it at 0 pixel, and then we apply it, then we see that our favorite recipes header has actually bubbled up to the top. So we've gotten rid of that margin as well. Okay, so now perhaps maybe we're happy with the changes that we've made. What we're actually going to do now is go back and apply those to our CSS. So we've got the CSS file open here on the left-hand side, and then we're going to actually put those values in. So for the image tag itself, remember that what we set in here was we actually put a border around the image tag. So we'll do a border, and we'll set this one here at 5 pixels, and it'll be solid black. So that will apply that border to all of the images in here. We also added a padding factor in there, so let's go ahead and put a padding in, and we set that at 10 pixels. So now we have the padding around our image tags. We also set up the margins for the page itself and for the H1. So on the H1, we'll come down here and we will add our margin, and we will set that equal to 0 pixel, and that will solve that problem. And then in the body tag, once again, if we want to, we can set that for the 0 margin as well. So up in our style sheet, we can find any place where we want to add that, and we can simply go into the body tag, and then in here we can set the margin equal to 0 pixels, and that will solve that problem. And then maybe we want to also go ahead and move some of this UL stuff over to the left a little bit more, so we can manipulate that. Now, one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that this particular unordered list or UL element is inside the nav. So if we use a nav and then a space UL, that will apply only to that UL element within the nav. So we won't have to worry about dealing with anything else that will mess us up from that perspective. So let's go with a nav UL. And then within here, what we will do is set our padding, and then we will do a padding left. We don't want to manipulate anything from the top, bottom, right. We want to simply manipulate the left. We'll set that for 25 pixels, and then what that does is that allows it to actually bring it a little bit more to the left from where it was before. Let's preview the changes. So if we refresh the browser, we can see that our elements have changed here. Our UL has moved to the left. We have the borders and the padding around each of our images. So basically that provides us with the ability to kind of manipulate some of the elements using the F12 debugger tools as our preview. When we're satisfied with the changes, we go back and we put them into our CSS file.